Rebecca was so mad at me that she had started doing donuts in the parking lot. I don't remember what she was mad about or how she figured that kicking up a lot of dust and spraying dirt everywhere was going to get back at me, but it must have made sense to her. Why she was mad isn't really important to the story, though. What's important is that she had attracted the attention of a couple park rangers. The rangers rolled up and cut right to the chase. "We know you're on drugs," they said. "You're acting crazy." They threatened us with a litany of charges ranging from reckless driving to disturbing the peace. They really had a hard-on for the drugs, though, and would not accept that Rebecca just had some issues that sometimes manifested in automotive tantrums. It was true that our last few days of camping had been a montage of altered states of consciousness, but we'd had the sense to leave all our party supplies, about an ounce of high-grade weed, several bottles of liquor, a couple ounces of shrooms, back at our campsite, and had only come to use the showers. So Rebecca wasn't on drugs at that moment, just borderline crazy. I had been in charge of stashing the party favors at camp, so I knew we had nothing in the car. As an olive branch, I asked the rangers if they'd like to search our car, if they'd let us go if we agreed to a search. I knew they had the right to search our campsite if they wanted to, and this was to be avoided at all costs, since even alcohol was prohibited. I thought I had weaseled our way out of a tight spot when I heard one of the rangers get on the radio and call the local police department to send a canine unit over. Shit. I knew we didn't have any usable drugs in the car, but the amount of weed that had been smoked in that car, I imagined the drug dog's synapses lighting up like a pinball machine. The car was a mess, and they were sure to find some crumb of something or other. It was a few minutes of tense waiting while the real cops and their drug dog made their way to the scene. I did my best to play it cool. There was nothing we could do but cross our fingers and keep bluffing. The first thing they did was have the dog circle the car. It got up on its hind legs with its front paws on the passenger window and barked. "The canine unit has alerted on your car. We will now proceed to search the interior of the vehicle." They opened the car up and directed the dog inside. Then Rebecca's friend came out of the showers where she had remained blissfully unaware of the whole affair. We got her up to speed on what was happening, at which point she informed us that there in fact was weed in the car. There was about an eighth in the pocket of her sweatshirt, which had been sitting in the car since the beginning of the trip. We had all been smoking out of the big bag we'd bought together, so her little head stash had been forgotten until now. Now it was sitting there like a bomb, the drug dog working away. The handler was pointing to various points in the vehicle, which the dog would then examine. The floor, the glove box, the passenger seat. Then the dog smelled the sweatshirt. The damn thing wasn't even stashed away in some corner. It was sitting on the center console between the two front seats, plain as day. The dog literally put his paw on the offending sweatshirt and barked. The cop gave us a look that said, "I knew it, and now I'm gonna nail your asses to the wall." Then, with the gods of good fortune and beautiful bong hits guiding his hand, he picked up the offending sweatshirt and threw it into the back of the car and began tearing apart the center console the sweatshirt had been sitting on. He sorted through all manner of pens and gum packages and receipts and dust and dirt and found not a damn thing. The closest he came to a payoff was an Altoids tin that had some ashes in it, which had at one point been used to hold roaches before they could be recycled for a rainy day. He made a big show out of having found the Altoids tin, but we knew the gods were with us that day and just looked indignant. After a half-hearted search for a screwdriver with which he would have ostensibly taken the center console apart, he finally gave up. Another call was coming in and the canine unit had other business to attend to. They had no choice but to let us go. We went back to our campsite, high on the beauty of life, and probably proceeded to get even higher on drugs. To be honest, I don't really remember what happened next, which supports the drug use theory. So I had lots of wild times with Rebecca, but I had wild times with a lot of women. One thing that made Rebecca unique, though, was that her dad was a billionaire and was the conduit through which I acquired the finest weed I've ever smoked. He flew us down to Miami to visit him one time. Despite his billionaire status, he balked at the idea of helping his daughter financially, despite the fact that she was often scraping by for bills, never had a reliable car, and just generally was having a hard time with money. Dad had divorced Mom and left Rebecca with her, then started his company and become a billionaire. While Rebecca was living in very real fear of getting stranded on the side of the road with car trouble, her dad was buying his new daughter an H2 Hummer for her 11th birthday. Obviously, she wasn't old enough to drive, but she had her own chauffeur, and so now she had her own car to be driven around in. This dynamic between Rebecca and her dad fucked her up good and proper. A lyric comes to mind when I think of her. She trades her sails for 1,000 kites. She sacrifices years for a few good nights. She knows the seas are rough. She knows she's gonna drown. So she's gonna rock the boat on the way down. That was Rebecca. Impractical and reckless. Here for a good time, not a long time. Fatalistic, but unresigned. Always down to rage. We were a perfect match. Several Grammy-winning pop stars had compounds on the same harbor as Rebecca's dad, except that he, being far richer than even the richest pop star, had decided that one compound on the water wasn't enough room, so he went ahead and bought two side by side and just knocked down the dividing wall. Their house was packed full of expensive shit. Probably the most ostentatious part was the entryway, where they had hung pictures of themselves with famous people. They had met the Pope, the Queen, the President, all sorts of movie and music stars. The funny thing was that this old white guy was really into hip-hop music, and really into smoking weed. You would never guess either thing by looking at him. He was very clean-cut and professional at all times, but got the best bud in Miami due to having invested in a local grow operation. Apparently, he had been out at the club one night when he had made an acquaintance who had been impressed by his wealth and largesse, and so wanted to impress him in turn. So he was taken to see an illegal grow room, and the rest was history. Soon they had a special room sectioned off with plastic sheeting where his plants got all the best in fertilizers, lighting, ventilation, etc. It must have cost a small fortune to put together, but it did produce the kinds of flowers you see in High Times magazine. The buds were thick with crystals, dense and sticky, the nicest I've ever seen. Breaking a nug in half was akin to breaking a giant jelly bean in half. The resin was that dense. The buds really were like a candy with their crisp, crystally outside and their gooey resinous center. The flavor was great as well. The weed that I smoked while I was there had a skunk base with a little bit of diesel and a bit of lemon, and it was super potent, so the flavor was thick. Top shelf private reserve Billionaire with the B shit for sure. For whatever reason, smoking weed was not something that Rebecca and her dad could bond over. It would have done great things for their relationship, but the new wife was super into the whole evil stepmother routine and basically manipulated Rebecca's dad into not helping her out financially, not having any sort of significant relationship with her, etc., while at the same time spoiling the shit out of their new daughter. It was a pretty ugly situation. So instead of just being able to ask her dad for some weed, we had to jimmy the glove box on one of his boats, where he kept a little head stash. It had been like a treasure hunt searching for that bud, because Rebecca had a number of places she knew to look, all of which were off-limits territory for her. There were lots of rich wooden drawers and cabinets, and finally we struck gold in the boat glove box. There wasn't a lot there, and we didn't dare take too much or the stash would be gone, but we did manage to get high. Very high. You don't know how good a munchies experience can be until you have access to a Billionaire's fully catered refrigerator. Highlights included fresh-cut fruit of every variety of the very highest quality, as well as yogurt, sandwich stuff, olives, and fancy rich people hors d'oeuvres in little jars. Artichoke hearts, asparagus, a couple cans of caviar. The pantry and freezer were equally impressive. From sweet to salty, fat-free to grease bomb, pedestrian to exotic, they had everything. Rebecca and I both gorged ourselves, and afterwards she decided to take a nap, while I opted to go out for a swim. The double compound had 2 pools in it, an oversized, fully heated pool, and a regular-sized pool over by the guest house, which was the normal, unheated kind. I had been told to use either of the pools, so I opted for the smaller guest house pool to avoid overheating myself. Now, it just so happens that famed producer DJ Trap King and Grammy-winning rapper Evolution and their entourages were staying in the Billionaire's guest house at the same time as our visit. Through his weed connections and ability to buy backstage contacts, Rebecca's dad had made friends with some rappers, and so whenever those rappers were in Miami, they stayed in his guest house so they wouldn't have to worry about other hotel guests smelling bud or making noise complaints. So I was floating around in the guest house pool, minding my own business, enjoying the warm Miami night, when out of the door comes Evolution himself, blunt in hand. I guess he just decided to step out and get some air, but he seemed as surprised to see me as I was to see him. I gave him a nod, eyed the blunt, tried not to stare. He spoke first. "You smoke?" "Hell yeah." He offered me the blunt and I swam over to the edge of the pool and took it. He stared out into the harbor while I puffed away like the little engine that could. It was a good thick blunt, like when the whole crew throws down a nug. There had been about a third of the blunt left when he gave it to me, so I wasn't sure if he would be passing it back, tossing it, heading back inside with it, so I really blasted it that first round. Took hits like I was in a weed-smoking competition. I kept peeking at E to see if he was giving me the side-eye. He wasn't. Seemed intent on the view. I tried to pass the blunt back to him. "Nah, keep it." So I kept puffing away at it. This was definitely the same bud I'd smoked earlier with Rebecca, except this was about 3 times as much of it. I was high as a kite, like a kite being flown from a spaceship. I was superhero high, dodging satellites. After a while, E spoke again. "It's beautiful, huh?" I could think of nothing more coherent to say than, "Fucking A." He stood there a bit longer while I turned that blunt into a decent-sized roach. Then he gave me a nod and wandered back inside. I took the rest of the roach to Rebecca so she could finish it off. She was annoyed that she had missed the encounter since she was a much bigger hip-hop fan than I was. To me, he was just a celebrity, someone I recognized from magazines and late-night talk shows. She was happy to at least have Evolution's roach, though, which she got a few good hits off of, getting her high as shit, so she couldn't complain too much.